Hi na 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 Hi na 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 Yambaramba yambaramba yambarambam bum bum Hanai na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 Hanai na 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 Hi na 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 Hi na 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 ya na na Ay 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 na 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 na. Shalom, shalom, wonderful friends. It is great to see you. I know we have a few other folks trickling in and a few folks who are under the weather today, although I'm glad to see one friend who's under the weather who actually can join because of that. So that's nice to have you as well. So friends, we are going to be exploring Jonathan Haidt, and who you might be familiar with. He's grown in popularity, and a few other thinkers, a few other psychologists on a topic that is very relevant right now: polarization, issues of political polarization and the like. So let's start with a poll question. Okay, are our political views, option one, freely chosen based on our deep moral inquiries into contemporary matters? Option two, mostly based on our upbringing? Option three, mostly due to our innate personalities? Wow, very split. 29% say our political views are freely chosen based on our deep moral inquiries into contemporary matters. 43% say mostly based on our upbringing. And 29% say mostly due to our innate personalities, nature, and nurture. Okay, very good. So because this is a little long-winded, there's a bunch of studies I want to reflect on. I hope you'll engage in the chat, and I'll try to read the chat as we go so I can stay on top of it. So friends, here we're going to take a different direction. Rather than examining just a school of psychology, as we've often done. Oh, we already got a comment. Okay. Yeah, some people think social media equates to political views. Okay. We're going to delve into the ideas of a singular influential contributor to the field with Jonathan Haidt, a distinguished professor of social psychology at NYU. Over the past decade or so, Professor Haidt has emerged as one of the most significant voices in moral psychology, centering his research around the mechanics of how people develop moral beliefs, subsequently deploy these beliefs, and how these beliefs shape their interactions with others in the real world. Haidt's thinking does not merely dwell on abstract ethical principles. Instead, he explores the complex interplay between reason and emotion in moral decision-making. And by examining these dynamics, he uncovers the deeper psychological applications that drive human behavior, revealing how our moral intuitions often precede rational thought. Raised in a secular Jewish home, Haidt's relationship with religion is complex. Despite identifying as an atheist, he acknowledges the moral frameworks provided by diverse religious traditions. This perspective underscores the interplay of personal identity, group affiliation, and moral reasoning. Haidt suggests that religion significantly shapes collective values and behaviors, fostering a sense of community essential for social cohesion. In his masterful and essential tome, The Righteous Mind, if you haven't read yet and you like today's class, I encourage you to check out this book. Haidt draws heavily on social psychological theories to explain the deep-rooted nature of political ideologies and how they affect people in society writ large. He argues that the differences between liberals and conservatives stem from fundamental psychological predispositions that influence how individuals prioritize moral values. Social psychology offers insights into how these predispositions, shaped by both genetic factors and socialization, lead to the formation of distinct moral foundations that guide political beliefs and behaviors. Haidt challenges the dogmatic tendencies found in both religious and atheist groups, exposing a shared psychological pitfall, in-group bias. For Haidt, religion plays a crucial role in shaping moral values and promoting social cohesion by providing a shared moral framework, fostering community and social capital, and inspiring moral motivation. Nonetheless, the decline of religion in public life and the rapid rise of secularism, also have significant implications. While secularism promotes individual rights and freedoms by and large, it can neglect the importance of community and social cohesion, leading to an overly individualistic society at times. Without a shared moral language, secular societies grapple to find common ground in the public square, resulting in a lack of cohesion and significant disconnection among the populace. So how do we see this notion manifest itself in society? Conservatives often emphasize values like a respect for authority, loyalty, and a certain ideological purity, which align with a preference for tradition and maintaining social order. These values are linked to the social psychological concept known as moral foundations theory, which suggests that certain moral values are more salient in different individuals, leading to varying political ideologies. Haidt explains that conservatives are more parochial concerned about their groups rather than of all humanity. This broader moral palette includes not only care and fairness, but also the additional foundations of loyalty, authority, and sanctity, which conservatives prioritize more than liberals, according to these studies. Right? Sanctity is less of a value that liberals talk about than conservatives, and authority and loyalty. Yes, and Cheryl, there seems to be a rise in Christian values, which can be a positive thing, but there also seems to be a rise in Christian nationalist values, which to me is a dangerous threat in society. Yeah, but yes, that's a good point. A rise in Christian values, but a decline in church attendance, right? About 2,000 to 3,000 churches close in America every year. So churches closing, but quote unquote traditional Christian values on the rise. On the other hand, liberals choose to emphasize care and fairness, reflecting an inherent affinity towards empathy, social justice, and equality. Haidt writes, in the contemporary United States, liberals are most concerned about the rights of certain vulnerable groups, and they look to government to defend the weak against the oppression by the strong. These moral priorities are not just abstract preferences, but are deeply embedded in the cognitive and emotional processes that shape how individuals perceive the world and their role within it. These differences in moral emphasis between conservatives and liberals are not simply chosen based on rational deliberation, according to Haidt, but are deeply rooted in the psychological predispositions and cultural contexts in which individuals are raised. Haidt observes that innate does not mean unmalleable, it means organized in advance of experience. This understanding underscores the idea that while certain traits or predispositions might be inherent, they are not rigid or fixed. They are organized in a way that predisposes individuals towards certain behaviors or responses, but these can be influenced and molded by subsequent experiences and learning. Likewise, political ideologies are profoundly influenced by the underlying moral foundations that resonate most with an individual's psychological makeup. The concept of care manifests differently between conservative and liberal ideologies, revealing how moral values are influenced by social psychological factors. Conservatives often prioritize care within their immediate social circles, such as family, close community, and nation. This focus on in-group care aligns with a psychological preference for loyalty and a strong sense of social identity, which Haidt describes as the binding foundations of morality. Conservatives, according to Haidt, have a moral matrix that allows them to detect threats to moral capital. They do not oppose change of all kinds, but they will fight back ferociously when they believe that change will damage the institutions and traditions that provide our moral exoskeletons, such as the family. This protective stance is rooted in a deep-seated concern for maintaining social order and preserving the integrity of the groups they belong to. So before I move on to liberals, we can now safely say that we can identify non-Orthodox Judaism as liberal and Orthodox Judaism as conservative, right? 79% of American Jews voted for the Harris administration, and well over 90% of Orthodox Jews voted for the Trump administration. If you go into the Hasidic world, probably over 95%. And so, of course, there are exceptions. There are liberal Orthodox Jews. There are conservative, reforming conservative Jews. But by and large, the denominations have assimilated into the politics of the day, where it is very predictable that 90% of attendees of a Reform or conservative synagogue will vote liberal, and over 90% of Orthodox Jews will vote conservative. And that's in some ways tragic, that Judaism be oversimplified in such ways. But yeah, anyways, my point is it's the same. Liberal Jews can learn from Orthodox Jews how to better take care of their local community, right? That Orthodox Jews show up at a shiva where they never even knew the person, or go to the funeral when they didn't even know the person. They're just in the larger community. That's like part of the norms of the society. And liberal Jews can learn more from that. And Orthodox Jews can learn a lot from liberal Judaism about universalism. So Orthodox Jews tend to be very unconcerned, charitably and in causes about non-Jews. So anyways, in contrast to that conservative view, liberals tend to extend their sense of care beyond their immediate circles, reflecting a psychological inclination towards universalism and a concern for the well-being of all, particularly marginalized groups. Haidt notes that liberals are more likely to feel compassion for people who are suffering, regardless of whether they're part of the same group. This broader focus on care is tied to the moral foundations of harm and fairness, which liberals prioritize over loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Their concern for social justice and equality drives them to advocate for policies that promote the welfare of disadvantaged populations, both within and beyond their own national borders. These differences in the scope of care underscore the complex interplay between moral values and the psychological processes that shape political ideologies, illustrating why conservatives and liberals often diverge in their approaches to social and political issues. Haidt's concern with political polarization is deeply rooted in social psychological principles, particularly those related to group dynamics and intergroup conflict. He argues that extreme polarization poses a significant threat to democratic societies by undermining social cohesion and increasing the potential for conflict. This loss of trust can be traced back to the ways in which polarization exacerbates in-group, out-group divisions, leading individuals to see those who hold opposing views not just as wrong, but as morally corrupt or even dangerous, right? Think of the MAGA rallies that say liberals are evil and should be locked up. Think of the part of the liberal discourse which views every voter for Trump as fundamentally evil. Social psychology offers insights into how polarization can deepen these divisions as people increasingly surround themselves with like-minded individuals, reinforcing their beliefs and becoming more hostile towards those who disagree. The breakdown in communication not only fuels further division, but also diminishes the willingness to engage in constructive dialogue, making it more challenging to find common ground or reach compromises on contentious issues. As polarization intensifies, the social fabric that holds democratic societies together begins to unravel, posing a serious risk to the health and stability of the political system. In response, Haidt has been involved in initiatives aimed at reducing polarization, applying social psychological strategies like promoting empathy, perspective taking, and dialogue across ideological divides. By emphasizing the psychological underpinnings of political beliefs, Haidt encourages a shift away from viewing political opponents as inherently wrong or immoral, Instead, he advocates for understanding that different moral foundations and psychological predispositions lead to diverse political perspectives. This approach aims to reduce the demonization of opposing groups and foster a more collaborative and healthy democratic society. Of course, conflict is inherent to humanity, rooted in our evolutionary drive for group survival and competition. This tendency manifests in every social sphere, and Haidt recognizes conflict not as a flaw, but a fundamental human trait. As he told me in an interview I did with him not long ago, which you can listen to, it's less than 10 minutes, we live in a world of extraordinary pluralism, and that can be difficult. To navigate this, Haidt urges deliberate interaction, especially in diverse societies. By slowing judgment and hastening forgiveness, we can mitigate our innate conflictual nature. Drawing from Jewish teachings, actually, is the notion to make for yourself a heart of many rooms. An idea from the Talmud that suggests the importance of being open to multiple viewpoints and embracing the complexity of human experience. Pretty cool, actually, that he quoted that in my interview with him. By fostering an attitude of understanding and acceptance, individuals can navigate the challenges of pluralism more effectively, reducing the potential for conflict and enhancing social cohesion. Now, there's a different contemporary psychologist I'm going to touch on now, Dr. Kurt Gray. For him, a contemporary social psychologist focused on polarization, his research has shown him that most people live with a binary that almost everyone wants to be a victim, seeing themselves as an angel, and wants the other side to be viewed as the perpetrator and as pure evil. The moral discourse is about competing perceptions of harm. The feeling of pain increases if one feels the pain was inflicted malevolently. The judged intent changes the perception of the pain. So it becomes easy and common to see righteous indignation and outrage, since almost no one wakes up and sees themselves as the monster. Politicians then capitalize on this binary thinking of us versus them and an increasing dislike of the other side. In times of polarization, people often cannot see the harm that the other side is describing. One side, for example, only sees the harm done to innocent immigrants, while the other side only sees the pain that those who immigrate illegally are causing to citizens. The idea that Puerto Rico can be called a floating island of garbage is deeply offensive and harmful to some, while to others, it's just a joke and not the real harm that matters. In one of Dr. Gray's recent studies, they found that conservatives believe that all are equally likely to be vulnerable and suffer, but that liberals think there are people especially vulnerable to suffering, like immigrants and poor African Americans, and others almost impervious to harm and suffering, like billionaires and police officers. It's about individualism versus group-based harm. For some, this is all just a both-sidism. And trying to understand the other moral viewpoint is deemed as a betrayal. Why would I want to understand a Trumper? Or why would I want to understand a progressive? That betrays my core values. Now, to be sure, while almost no one wants to be victimized, once there's a labeling of perpetrator and victim, everyone wants to be on the victim side. Think of O.J. Simpson during his trial, talking about how everyone was against him. Consider the power of the image of the walker that Harvey Weinstein used during his trial. Here's a quote from a New York Times article about the Weinstein trial. Studies have shown that when jurors perceive a victim in a sexual assault case as a person with a disability, they're more likely to believe the victim and punish the defendant. Other research suggests a defendant's intellectual or developmental disability might lead jurors to discount liability. Similarly, research indicates that jurors are likely to be more lenient in assigning liability and punishment when a defendant is or appears to be 50 or older. In this sense, both age and disability status neutralize or offset juror and public perceptions of danger and risk. Weinstein argued that he did more to advance women in Hollywood than anyone else and claimed he was a victim. It's not just a legal strategy to declare oneself a victim, but rather a psychology that humans share. But Judaism urges us to recognize our own capacity for being a perpetrator. In a larger sense, religion has historically served as a powerful tool for social cohesion, providing a shared set of beliefs, rituals, and moral codes that bind communities together. Haidt explains that religious rituals evolved as mechanisms to foster group solidarity, creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose among adherents. These rituals and beliefs help define the moral boundaries of a community, guiding behavior and reinforcing social norms that maintain order and unity within the group. By the way, one of the reasons I think it's a failed approach for Jewish identity to say, I just like the ethics, I don't like the ritual, right? I like Jewish values, but the ritual stuff, that's not for me. It's because we see from these studies that can't sustain Jewish identity. That can sustain universalistic identity. I can be a good liberal or conservative based on my Jewish values. But I'm not going to sustain a Jewish identity if I give away the rituals that are inherent to holding on to that group identity, ultimately, that social cohesion. However, Haidt also acknowledges the dual nature of religion. While it can unite, it can also divide, especially in modern American society, where religious affiliation often correlates with political ideology. This alignment has deepened political polarization as religious and social identities become intertwined with political loyalties, creating a landscape where religion no longer serves as a universal moral guide, but rather as a marker of division. The challenge in contemporary society is to navigate the dual role of religion in a way that maximizes its potential for fostering social cohesion while minimizing its capacity to divide. By approaching religious diversity with respect and understanding, societies can work towards a more inclusive and harmonious coexistence. Haidt overturns the traditional notion that moral reasoning is predominantly a product of rational thought. Most people like to think, I believe what I think morally because I worked through it, intellectually. And through reason, I came to all my conclusions. He disagrees with this. He contends that what we typically identify as moral reasoning is in reality largely governed by intuition and emotional responses. This view resonates with psychological theories proposing that humans frequently rely on instinctive reactions or gut feelings when making decisions. Only afterwards do they employ reasoning to rationalize and support these intuitions. This shift in understanding suggests that our moral judgments are more deeply rooted in our subconscious emotional states than in deliberate logical deliberation. This is why trying a progressive and a Trumper trying to debate is so futile, because it never was about reason, according to Haidt, right? You're not going to say any logic that's going to convince the other person for something that's so deeply intuitive to them. This intuition-driven process is evident in how people perceive their opponents in moral or political debates. Haidt notes that individuals tend to see those who disagree with them as driven by emotion rather than reason, while failing to recognize the same tendencies in themselves. This asymmetry in perception creates a psychological barrier to constructive dialogue, as each side views the other as irrational or morally flawed. Understanding that moral reasoning is often a post hoc rationalization of intuitive responses has significant implications for social harmony. It suggests that efforts to bridge divides should focus less on winning arguments from logical persuasion and more on addressing the underlying emotional and intuitive foundations for moral beliefs. By fostering empathy, self-awareness, and an understanding of the psychological mechanisms that drive our moral judgments, individuals and societies can create more effective strategies for resolving conflicts and promoting mutual understanding. Haidt takes a long-term view of human history to argue that despite the conflicts and challenges of the present, there has been a clear trend of moral progress over the centuries. Societal violence has decreased significantly, and there has been a steady expansion of rights and protections for marginalized groups, reflecting a broader trajectory toward greater justice, equality, and respect for human dignity. Haidt also acknowledges, however, that the modern moment may represent a reversal in this trend for moral progress, particularly in terms of social cohesion. Societies today are experiencing increased polarization and a breakdown in the social fabric that once held communities together. The rise of identity politics, growing economic disparities, and the erosion of trust in institutions are all factors contributing to this trend. Now, a criticism of Haidt's moral psychology could be that it oversimplifies political ideologies by reducing them only to a select amount of moral foundations. While the framework is helpful to understand the basic building blocks of thought and action, it risks overlooking the complexity of political beliefs, such as the roles of historical context, entrenched social structures, or the dynamism of social structures. Haidt's approach also may reinforce stereotypes by implicitly delineating that liberals and conservatives have moral differences that cannot be altered easily, potentially hardening polarization rather than promoting understanding. By the way, think of like Mormons. Mormons are very heavily conservative, but think about the two most prominent Mormon politicians, Senator Jeff Flake and Senator Mitt Romney, who both supported Harris over Trump. And some of those other interesting shifts that occurred recently. Or I think about liberal Jews vote the same way almost always, but Orthodox Jews shifted greatly over the last decade in terms of their move to the right. So these shifts do happen among religious, political, entrenched groups. Still, despite any challenges, Haidt remains optimistic about the long-term trajectory of human progress. He suggests that while the short-term outlook may be troubling, the overall direction of history has been one of increasing rights for the most vulnerable in society, reduced violence, and moral advancement. By keeping a long-term perspective, individuals and societies are able to maintain hope and continue to work towards building a more just and peaceful world, even in the face of temporary yet frustrating setbacks. Haidt observes that activists with religious backgrounds often approach social issues with a focus on love, forgiveness, and compassion, values deeply ingrained in many religious traditions. This approach, exemplified by historic movements such as the Civil Rights Movement, where figures like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. drew on Christian teachings for nonviolent resistance and reconciliation, contrasts with the strategies of non-religious activists. By the way, it's interesting that MLK, and I think deeply part of his connection to Jews, chose to root the movement in the Exodus and Moses rather than on Jesus as a religious Christian. He could have, he built that quote unquote Judaic Christian bridge, and Jews were very involved in the movement, of course. And Moses and the Exodus were more prominent than Jesus. Of course, preaching in church, Jesus is going to be there, but in his universalistic movement. Non-religious activists tend to emphasize social justice, fairness, and equality, often adopting a more confrontational stance to address systemic injustices and hold perpetrators accountable. Haidt's framework highlights that these differing approaches between secular and religious social justice moves reflect the underlying moral frameworks guiding each form of activism, rooted in emotional and intuitive responses shaped by cultural and religious backgrounds. By acknowledging that moral and ethical divides stem not from rational disagreements, but from deeply embedded intuitions, Haidt encourages a more empathetic understanding of these differences. This perspective reveals that moral conflicts in pluralistic societies are deeply tied to the core of our identities, rather than merely being intellectual disputes. Haidt's theory of social intuitionism fundamentally challenges the established framework of moral development, most notably that of Lawrence Kohlberg, who, as we learned earlier together, emphasized the role of moral reasoning as the core driver of moral growth. As we're going to see in our 50-part series, these psychologists are a part of very different theories and empirical studies that put them up against each other. Is it reason or is it emotion? According to Kohlberg, individuals progress through stages of moral development by engaging in increasingly sophisticated forms of ethical reasoning, culminating in a principled understanding of justice. However, Haidt, influenced by David Hume's philosophy rather than Kant, argues that this model overlooks the central role of intuition and emotion in shaping our moral judgments. Haidt posits that moral judgments are not the result of careful reasoning, but are instead driven by quick, automatic intuitions. This approach diverges sharply from Kohlberg's emphasis on rationality and suggests that moral reasoning is more of a post hoc process used to explain and defend the judgments people already make intuitively. Haidt's theory resonates with religious traditions like Christianity and Orthodox Judaism, where moral and ethical divides are often deeply rooted in cultural and religious identities. These traditions emphasize the importance of moral emotions such as love, guilt, and fear in shaping behavior and ethical decision-making. For instance, in Christianity, the teachings of Jesus often appeal to compassion and love as guiding forces for moral behavior, rather than purely rational deliberation. Similarly, Orthodox Judaism places significant emphasis on following halacha, divine commandments, which are often seen as expressions of deep, intuitive obedience to God, rather than the result of independent, rational analysis. Haidt acknowledges these parallels, noting that religions are moral exoskeletons. If you live in a religious community, you are enmeshed in a set of norms, relationships, and intuitions that work primarily to influence your behavior. This observation underscores the idea that religious moral systems, much like Haidt's concept of social intuitionism, are built upon shared intuitions and emotions that guide behavior within a community. These moral systems, deeply embedded in cultural and religious traditions, often lead to divides that are not easily reconciled through rational debate alone. Okay, now to pivot to Judaism. Judaism's rich tradition of dialectical thinking and emotional cultivation underscores the belief that intellectual rigor and emotional intelligence are both essential to living a meaningful and ethical life. The Torah brings much wisdom when it comes to directing and transforming emotions, combined with the Jewish commitment to debate and dialogue, offer a holistic approach to personal and communal growth. This approach recognizes that emotions are a powerful force in human life, one that must be engaged thoughtfully and deliberately in the pursuit of justice, love, and spiritual fulfillment. A deep commitment to dialectical thinking and argumentation is most vividly illustrated in the Talmudic concept of machloket, which we translate simply as debate. The concept of debate is the locus of Jewish legal and ethical discourse, where divergent opinions are not only tolerated, but are considered essential to the process of uncovering truth. For example, the famous debates between the schools of Hillel and Shammai in the Talmud represent more than just intellectual disagreements. They embody a profound respect, generally, for multiple perspectives within the Jewish tradition. Despite their frequent disagreements, the Talmud records that these and those are the words of a living God, acknowledging the value of both perspectives and the importance of maintaining a dialogue that embraces complexity rather than seeking simplistic answers. The machloket tradition is not merely an intellectual exercise, but is deeply connected to the cultivation of emotional intelligence in Jewish life. The Torah and subsequent Jewish teachings emphasize the need to navigate and manage emotions in a way that promotes ethical behavior and spiritual growth. For instance, the mitzvah, "You shall not covet," goes beyond the mere prohibition of actions. It calls for a transformation of one's inner desires and emotions. The Torah recognizes that envy and jealousy are natural human emotions, but it encourages individuals to cultivate gratitude and contentment as antidotes to these feelings. Jewish teachings also emphasize love in three directions: towards fellow covenant members, towards strangers, and towards God. The commandment to love your fellow as yourself is a cornerstone of Jewish ethics, urging Jews to extend empathy and compassion within their communities. But to also think broadly, this love is not limited to those who are Jewish, because the Torah also commands, "You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." We are to understand that this simple precept emphasizes that the remarkable feat of extending care and compassion to those outside one's immediate social circle, including the marginalized and the vulnerable. The expansive scope of love reflects a deep emotional and ethical commitment to seeing humanity in others, no matter how diametrically opposite they might be from a Jewish perspective. Actually, just to bring this home, the Torah once says you should love your fellow Jew. The Torah once says you should love God, but it twice says you should love the stranger. right? So interesting that the Torah doubles the amount. Once love God, once love your fellow Jew, but it knows how hard it is to love the foreigner, so it says that twice. Indeed, throughout in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy. Indeed, throughout Jewish history, the cultivation of emotions has been a central theme in the writings of many Jewish thinkers and texts, reflecting a deep understanding of the intricate relationship between emotions, spirituality, and ethical conduct. Maimonides, in his Guide for the Perplexed, emphasized the need for balance in emotions, particularly in the fear and love of God. He writes, the two objects, love and fear, are acquired by two different means. The love is the result of the truths taught in the law, including the true knowledge of the existence of God, whilst fear of God is produced by the practices prescribed in the law. In essence, Rambam elucidates that these emotions are to be carefully cultivated, not as opposing forces, but as complementary aspects of spiritual and ethical practice. The cultivation of love towards God is another central theme in Jewish thought, expressed most famously in the Shema. You shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. This love is not purely emotional, but it's also expressed through actions, observing mitzvot, engaging in prayer, and striving to align one's will with divine will. The integration of love, both emotional and practical, into the daily life of a Jew is a testament to the Torah's recognition that emotions cannot simply be reasoned away, but must be actively nurtured and expressed. The Hasidic tradition further exemplifies the importance of emotional cultivation, often placing joy, love, and attachment to God at the heart of religious life. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, taught that the service of God must be infused with joy, as joy itself is a powerful spiritual force that can elevate the soul and bring one closer to the divine. The emphasis on positive emotions is seen in many Hasidic teachings, where sadness or despair is viewed as a barrier to spiritual growth, while joy and love are seen as pathways to divine connection. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, another of the influential Hasidic masters, famously taught that it's a great mitzvah to always be happy. For Rabbi Nachman, happiness was not just a fleeting emotion, but a fundamental Jewish duty that helps to overcome challenges and bring one into closer communion with the divine. He believed that by cultivating happiness, one could more easily fulfill other mitzvot and maintain faith in difficult times, as joy strengthens the soul and dispels the darkness of despair. Another example can be found in the teachings of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, which focuses on the ethical and moral development of the individual. Rabbi Salanter emphasized the importance of self-reflection and the active cultivation of positive character traits, such as humility, patience, and kindness. His teachings often stress that emotions like anger and jealousy must be managed through regular introspection and ethical practice, illustrating the belief that moral and emotional refinement is essential for living a life in accordance with Jewish values. Thus, when he draws on biblical narratives, Jonathan Haidt illustrates the idea that the strength of a society lies in its ability to embrace and manage diversity, not to suppress it in pursuit of a homogeneous moral order. In a functioning democracy, the presence of varied moral and ethical foundations should be seen as a feature, not a flaw, contributing to the richness of political life, right? Or as they say in the software world, a feature, not a bug of the system. The challenge then is not to erase these differences, but to find ways to bridge them, fostering a culture of mutual respect and understanding that can withstand the pressures of polarization and division. Such a perspective highlights the importance of embracing cultural and innate differences rather than striving for an unrealistic utopian unity, such as that symbolized by the Tower of Babel. In the biblical narrative, the construction of Migdal Bavel represented humanity's attempt to unify under a single culture and language, ultimately leading to divine intervention that scattered the people and diversified their languages. This diversity is not a flaw, but a necessary aspect of a healthy and functioning society. In a democracy, these differences in moral and ethical foundations, shaped by culture, upbringing, and innate tendencies, allow for a dynamic, pluralistic society where multiple viewpoints can coexist and enrich public discourse. The catastrophic events of the flood and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah illustrate the consequences of failing to uphold collective standards of morals and basic ethics. The story of the flood is often interpreted as a divine response to pervasive violence and corruption in the world. The people's failure to address these issues collectively led to their downfall, highlighting the dangers of moral disintegration and societal collapse when ethical boundaries are ignored or violated. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, in particular, is closely linked to the mistreatment of strangers and immigrants and refugees, who can be seen as individuals whose moral foundations have been shaped by different cultures. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah are condemned not for their differing views, but for their cruelty to outsiders. This reflects a broader theme in Jewish thought about the ethical treatment of the ger, the stranger. The Torah repeatedly commands the Israelites to love and protect the stranger, emphasizing that the stranger's vulnerability should evoke compassion rather than fear or exclusion, 36 times. This ethical directive recognizes that differences in moral outlooks rooted in diverse cultural backgrounds are not threats to be eliminated, but opportunities for moral growth and societal enrichment. So if we could shift our debates from entrenched positions on issues like taxes and abortion to discussions about the relative importance of different virtues, we might begin to break out of our polarized bubbles. This shift would not only allow for a more nuanced and productive discourse, but also enable us to appreciate the underlying values that drive different perspectives. Rather than viewing our differences as insurmountable obstacles, we can start to see them as opportunities for deeper understanding and growth. Haidt's work urges us to move beyond the simplistic categorization of people as right or wrong based on their political or moral stances, and instead focus on the complex moral foundations that shape those stances. By reframing our discussions in this way, we can begin to break down the barriers that polarization has erected between us. Haidt's emphasis on understanding the moral foundations underlying different viewpoints encourages a more empathetic and open-minded approach to public discourse. This approach does not require people to agree on every issue, but rather to recognize some of the validity of different values and the reasons why people might prioritize them differently. In doing so, we can create a more inclusive and respectful dialogue that moves us closer to solutions that consider the diverse needs and concerns of society as a whole. Haidt's perspective also offers a valuable framework for bridging the gap between religious and secular approaches to activism. When I interviewed Haidt several years ago, he said that activists who come from a faith tradition tend to act with more compassion, whereas those who are not coming from a religious background tend to be angrier or more confrontational. Religious activism, with its emphasis on moral and ethical principles rooted in faith, often excels in promoting forgiveness, compassion, and healing. These are essential qualities in addressing the wounds of a divided society, fostering reconciliation and building communities based on mutual respect and love. For example, the teachings of figures like Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi demonstrate how religious values can inspire movements for social justice that emphasize nonviolence and the moral imperative to uplift underclasses yearning for a seat at the table. On the other hand, secular activism plays a crucial role in challenging entrenched power structures and advocating for systemic change. By focusing on the practical and structural aspects of social issues, secular activism can address the root causes of inequality and injustice, pushing for reforms that create a more equitable society. This approach is often driven by principles of fairness, equality, and human rights, which are essential in the fight against discrimination, poverty, and other ills that plague progress in society. Ultimately, Haidt suggests that both religious and secular approaches to activism play crucial roles in addressing complex social issues. Religiously inspired activism often excels in fostering forgiveness and healing, while secular activism can drive significant structural changes and challenge entrenched political dynamics. No one is immune from the effects of polarization. In my own work, I've certainly leaned towards a particular point at the exclusion of views I found intolerable. And like many others, I'm susceptible to media bubbles and the echo chambers created by selective exposure to information. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in psychology, as it exploits cognitive biases and emotional responses to create a sense of validation and community around shared opinions. Friends, to conclude, only by recognizing the psychological mechanisms behind media bubbles and leveraging data to study their effects are essential for fostering a more informed and balanced discourse. And of course, recognizing the strengths inherent in approaches allows activists to collaborate more effectively and engage in meaningful dialogue that bridges diverse moral foundations is essential if we're going to bridge divides and do the difficult work of healing our fractured world. In a time when societal norms often seem dominated by bitterness and rancor, Haidt's work reminds us that our differences, whether they pertain to political ideology, moral values, or religious belief, are not necessarily divisive. Instead, these differences can serve as sources of strength and opportunities for growth. By shifting polarized debates to discussions focused on the relative importance of shared virtues, we can foster a more inclusive, empathetic public discourse. And through accepting and embracing both religious and secular approaches, enables us to leverage the full spectrum of human, moral, and ethical resources, offering a path to build bridges across divides and work towards a more just and compassionate society. Haidt's insights truly provide a hopeful framework for navigating our differences and uniting efforts to address the challenges of our time. Friends, given the amount of time I wanted to give to this topic, what I want to do now is allow everyone the chance to speak, and I'll just take a closing remark rather than respond after each person. So let's open up the floor now for our remaining 12 minutes and see who would like to jump in first with any engagement with Haidt, or agreeing or disagreeing, or any other directions you want to go. Hopefully there's enough provocative material here to spark a conversation. Yes, David.
Okay, hi, everybody. Such tumultuous times, and I don't want to give up fighting for women's rights and the underdogs, and who knows what the world is going to look like. But I don't want to come to some fake, nicey that while the walls are tumbling down, the whole idea of speaking truth to power, keep fighting for the widow and the underdog, those are Jewish values. On the other hand, I did have a conversation with a family member who was, ultra right. I'm ultra left. And what I realized is it turned into name calling, and we each had our own set of facts, and we ended up feeling really bad rather than listening to the deeper values, hopes, and fears of the other. So that part I can understand. Trying to listen better can somehow heal the world, but I don't want to give up fighting my fight. That's really important.
Great. Thank you, David. Wonderful. Let's go to Stan and then to Aglaia.
Your descriptions of conservatives and liberals might have applied 10 years ago. I don't think they apply anymore. I think the movements are almost unrecognizable from what they previously were as far as values are concerned. Now I find myself agreeing more with Liz Cheney than with Bernie Sanders. So, and I think that both of them have been pretty true to their core beliefs, but I don't believe that they reflect the values of their parties. One observation I have is a neighbor of ours had a Trump sign in the front yard, but next to it had another sign that said Jesus Christ in 24. From my study of Christianity, I don't think they belong in the same yard. So, as you know, Shmuly, I have a lot of friends who are opposite from me politically. We try to discuss certain things. Our viewpoints on Israel totally differ, except that I'm from a generation where I'm still very loyal to Israel, even though I condemn what Israel's been doing. So it's hard to bring us together. We live in a community that cannot even have the Orthodox rabbis on the same rabbinic council as the rest of the rabbis. We are divided. I think your work in particular is doing a great job of trying to heal that. You got a long way to go.
Thank you, Stan. Awesome. Okay, Aglaya, over to you.
All right. So the short version of this is that because you brought up dialectical thinking, I had to go to Hegel, of course, and everything though. And I thought about just how often people define themselves according to what they're not, and they see the other side and they say, okay, well, I am not this and that, and I don't believe in whatever it is that this other side is saying, and so therefore, and then it usually devolves into a power struggle and everything like that though. I'm just kind of wondering though, if we probably want to try a different tactic, because the idea of, hey, I'm not a conservative, apparently isn't working so well. So it's I don't know. I mean, that's just to throw that out there.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So what I heard basically, at least somewhere along the line, was the notion of trying to hear the other. And something Marshall Rosenberg certainly tried to emphasize in his Center for Nonviolent Communication years ago, trying to get to the basic human needs we all have. The issue with what I just heard is that takes time and effort. And the way our society has certainly devolved at this point, we want instant whatever, whether it's instant healing of my ills or instant voting, and all the social media is instantaneous. So having the kinds of in-depth conversations which can help any of us get to our heart and see the other's heart is just lost in our current social norm.
Great, Sarah. Thank you so much. Okay, Gary. Hi, Gary.
Morning, everyone. The politics have inched its way into into our personal and social lives. I don't think our founding fathers would have be happy with where we're at today, to be frank, in my opinion. And I think one of the issues for the divisiveness is that we've all kind of, when I say we, the politicians and individuals have kind of defined their own sense of truth. At one point the truth was the truth, and now everybody has their own definition of what the truth is, depending on what how they see it. And I want to go back for a moment what Stan said about the conservative and liberal definitions. I think those are Jewish values, and for the most part, probably Christian values. But we don't see it that way anymore. It goes back to developing our own truth, and we've kind of picked those apart. And I think that as we have moved forward, the Christians used to wear these things, WWJD, these bracelets for those, what would Jesus do? Well, surely Christian nationalism has gone way off of WWJD. And I think as Jews, we've also have moved off way into a too far of a liberal perspective and not seeing the whole thing. We see the Orthodox, specifically Chabad, walking around just put on tefillin. If you put on tefillin, you're okay. And we've gone way to the right. And I think we need to go back to finding the real truth and increase our religious affiliation, both Jewish as well as others, so that those that speak out like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't think really speaks for the Christian society, but people pick their religion off social media, and rather than at churches. And I'll stop.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so anyone else we didn't hear from yet? Either Ken or Shulamit or Isaac or Mara or Cheryl. Anyone else want to jump in before I respond to some of that? Okay, so let me just offer some closing remarks based on some of those, and I will give voice to some things in the chat. So Ken wrote, So do Jews choose their groups, whether Orthodox or not, based on their political ideology or vice versa? I think actually oftentimes people are choosing their religious group based on their own politics. So I think it can go the opposite, but I'll give an example. Conservative Reform Jews are joining Chabad's. Conservative, meaning lowercase c, conservative, Reform Jews who find the Reform congregations to be all liberal, are joining Chabad's, which are politically conservative. And you're seeing that more and more, that they're leaving and making that shift. That's an interesting example of that. And I think there's a few other examples like that as well. So that's the Ken's point over there. And to Mara's point over there around taking the long view, yes, I think that's an insightful point, which also, Aglaia gave voice to, in addition to Aglaia's point around needing a new political discourse. It turns out liberals just yelling that Trump is a fascist and a racist is actually a poor strategy that actually encourages people to vote for him more than less. So now to David's point around still fighting, I think that's a great point. I hope what nobody hears me saying in giving voice to the psychological theory of understanding what values, how our values might be innate or might drive some of these leanings, is that no one hears me saying that we should just close up shop and accept evil as okay, or be silent in the face of injustice. I hope what folks would hear me saying is that we should still combat injustice. We should still speak out against lies and misinformation, and against harm to vulnerable populations. And while we do that, still find some ways to understand why people think what they think and why they do what they do at the same time. To Stan's point, I think it's a great point around how the parties have changed. And there's so much, there's too many op-eds out there now and why that's happening. To give one of the most obvious examples, even though there's so many others as well, it wasn't long ago that the Republicans were the militaristic hawks and Democrats were doves, right? And now the Democratic Party wants to be interventionist in the world, and the party of Trump wants to be America first and to pull back from intervening in foreign policy. That's very recent that kind of shift happened. If you go back to George W. Now to Sarah's point around time and effort and our desire for instant change, I think that's exactly right. It takes a lot of people a long time to change. Some people change instantaneously, but for us to invest in the health of this country, to look at the shadow side of this country and the health of relationships, that's not going to change instantaneously. But having some hope, as Mara said, in what can happen over periods of time if we represent this long view. And then finally, to Gary's point around hyperpoliticization, if I have any hope for the coming 4 years, it's that at least these street signs are going to come down. Hopefully, less of these hats are going to be worn, and people won't feel the need to campaign for their view, at least for a few years. And maybe we can, lower the temperature a little bit. But to your point around values, Gary, I think it's really very astute, because in the name of Jewish values, you can suggest anything. You can suggest a hawk agenda or a dove agenda. You can suggest pro-life or pro-choice. You can suggest anything you want. That's why VBM is not a Jewish values organization. It's a Jewish learning organization. If people just stick with their entrenched values, we're not going to get very far. If we engage in Jewish learning, we're gonna think about how values, juxtaposed to each other, are in tension with each other, and how we can get a more sophisticated understanding of our values, and how pluralistically we can both fight for our values and come together around difference of values. With that, I want to close with a plug for the next Hammerman lecture next month, where we have an Orthodox rabbi and a Reformed journalist who are coming together based upon a book they wrote on the Parsha. And if you're not in person, you can join virtually, and are going to talk about how we can learn Torah together across religious and political divides, and how we can see that as something potentially beneficial. That said, let's also continue to hold our small knit communities of shared values where we can organize and comfort each other and strengthen each other as well. Friends, next week, we're going to be coming together for session 8. And just to give you a little heads up on our topic, I don't always do that, but we are going to move from this political polarization to Stanley Milgram and the shock experiment. Then we're going to move to Seligman and positive psychology. We're going to move to the psychology of beauty, and then talk about dreams and gratitude and creativity and how we learn and so many other great things. So I look forward to that journey with you. Thank you for joining. Have a blessed day.